Welcome everybody to the Blind Ambitions podcast. Welcome everybody to the Blind Ambitions podcast. Today I have a guest that has been a long time coming and one of my very favorite human beings ever. This is Jess Regan.
Thank you.
Jess is the co-founder of PAIV, which is an incredible up-and-coming startup that I really, really want to dive in and let you give all the good stuff about. But I actually got to know Jess. I think we were just kicking it back, trying to figure out what the first year was.
Yeah.
I think we decided
2020.
Yeah.
Ish.
So it's been some time.
Yeah.
And when I met Jess, Jess has been known from my perspective, as the go-to person in all things sales quality, sales performance, recruiting, and you've made an incredibly fun transition, at least from afar, watching you become co-founder and entrepreneur, one of the grittiest people I've seen do it for a minute.
Thank
So
you.
that's been great to see. But I want to give you a chance. Give us a little bit of your rundown, what brought you to this point, and then we'll jump into PAIV.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So just the last 42 years.
Yeah.
We'll just let's dive in.
And counting.
Yeah. Professionally was in field sales for 20 years and just developed a passion for sales leadership, recruiting, and, kind of went along that journey. And in one of my roles in field sales, I was doing sales performance, and I met my co-founder. They had started to, to kind of put together the pieces of this software called Gamify back in the day. And I really felt a special energy from that co-founding team, from Emily and David. And I just felt like I have to be a part of this. Like, sometimes when you feel it's like called instead of just like a job.
Yeah.
I felt called to it. And so I tried to figure out a way, like, how can I get involved, and, can I consult you, or,
Yeah.
started with that. And then it turned into, why don't you come here and be here full time? And the first year that I was there, we grew 400%, and
Wow.
they brought me in as a founder.
Wow. Okay. So there's a lot there, but before
That was really, quick intro.
Do you consider yourself, like, what are your years in solar? Do you consider yourself in solar? Do you consider yourself in D2D?
Yeah.
How do you interpret yourself?
I think that's the impact I have on what we're currently doing, is that I'm a little mix of, I'm a mutt, right? In door-to-door and outside sales. I've sold alarms. I've sold pest control. I've sold solar. And then in between those, satellite, insurance, a couple other little things. And so, solar was most recent. I did that for almost 6 years, and pest control for 7, and alarms for 5, and
Wow.
then sprinkled in other things.
Wow. So you felt called to join the team at PAIV. Talk to me about the transition from sales leader, not to oversimplify it, to co-founder to entrepreneur. What's that been like?
Yeah, there's so many similarities, actually, right? Like, so and this, like, transitioning into software as a whole, I did have an opportunity in other roles to work with developers to build out in-house software.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest struggles that I had was we would build something really cool, and it was only for that company.
Right.
I was like, I want to share this. Like,
Yeah.
I want other people to be able to use this, especially since my passion is empowering, sales and service people. And so, that transition was really easy because it still allowed me to sell myself, the company, the mission of PAIV. I still get to do that every single day, which I love. But then you're transitioning into product and actually building something that I would have loved.
Yeah.
Like, I'm building a product that I would have loved to have as a sales rep.
That's super rewarding.
Yeah.
That's how you know you're in the right spot, right?
Yeah.
So PAIV, to pause on that for just a minute, talk to us about PAIV. So you're in the tech space, but what are some of the big problems that you'd say you're solving for right now?
Yeah. So first off, the transition, right, from Gamify to PAIV, because we rebranded. Gamify was focused heavily on gamification, on incentives and all of that. But we really felt like we were solving bigger problems, like what you're saying, right? Like, we were solving bigger problems for the sales rep, for technicians. And so it was natural for us to say, like, hey, we need to represent this better by focusing on, a new brand, a new name. PAIV is, paving the way for people who are hitting the pavement, right? Like
Oh, that's cool.
there's a lot of tie-ins there, and then of course we have the AI in the middle, and so the problem that we're solving is human connection. And I know that sounds really silly, and we can go deeper into that, but we want to restore eye contact for sales and service people.
Yeah.
And so when you're out in the field, and if I'm knocking on a door, if I'm in a kitchen and I'm selling a product, a lot of times I've got my notes, I've got my iPad, I've got my laptop out on a counter, and I'm trying to interact with this other person to give them a good experience. But I'm heads down trying to remember everything they're saying, and so really our goal was to empower that person and that field rep to be able to interact with another human being and have that logged in a way that they can then take actions from that. And it's just as natural as breathing. You're just
That's so cool.
do your job easily.
That's so cool. I don't think it's silly at all. I think that there's a sea of companies that focus so much on product and delivery and a lot of dryness. And I don't personally get engaged in an emotional way until I hear the why. And I just love how you had that sprinkled through. Do you feel like the why and the mission was drastically different from when you decided to move from Gamify over to PAIV? Was the why inherently different?
The why, I would say the why was the same, but the marketing of it was different, right? Like we needed to market it better.
Yeah.
The mission was always big. The vision was always big. Much bigger even than we'll talk about today. But we needed the marketing and the branding, which, like we talk about sales, but marketing and branding is my love, is my passion. And the
You're phenomenal at it.
the creative side of that, right? And so we wanted our brand to match our mission. And so that's kind of how it came about.
That's awesome. Would you say that your primary target client who you're looking to just wow and bowl over, it's the sales rep at the door or in the home or?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it is today, like outside sales. So, a lot of people don't think about this, but Fortune 500 companies have outside sales teams, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not just somebody who's going door to door in a residence or a residential neighborhood. There's people that go and visit businesses and other places of work, restaurants. And so we just really want to empower that outside sales person, or we call them a field rep.
Very cool. Have you seen any companies that you've worked with, some of those like pilot clients? I know we're like an early startup phase. And so you get those early clients that are early adopters. Have you seen any with really cool transitions or like upticks they've been able to see or changes in their business that you've been able to be a part of? Those are so fun. We just did case studies, and even when you get to the point where you can ask for a case study is a huge milestone in a founding experience. Yeah.
Because that company or that person is putting their neck on the line saying, we've had a good enough experience that now we're willing to talk about it.
It's huge.
Put it out in the open, support, so we just did these case studies, and that's what I saw is like going from, these companies that have really stuck with us through some of these changes and have also been part of the journey. Like they're informing the changes. Like we really love to listen. We call them like customer advisors. It's they tell us, hey, have you thought about, doing this differently? And we're like, that's a good point. We should do that.
Yeah.
And then execute.
Oh, that's so valuable. That's so cool. Well, this came into my feed today, and I feel like it's just such a perfect example of the energy I always feel from all of you guys at PAIV. First off, I didn't know anything about Gamify until, Jess Regan was part of the team. So in my LinkedIn feed today, Emily Applegarth, I'm sure you saw this post. So adorable. She says, Jess Regan is such an unfair advantage for PAIV. Here's why. 20 years experience as a top performer in the trades. So he loves and respects customer. He's so obsessed with the vision. He's what we call an all-the-timer, never clocks out, never had a job where he wasn't working his ass off. The hustle and is vibrant here at PAIV. She goes on and on and on. And all of these things are just so
I'm
dead
uncomfortable.
on.
Yeah.
I'm uncomfortable. And then, right on the heels of this, as you and I are kind of connecting on the time here, I'm like, hey, buddy, do you know that your Instagram's down? And you're like, I pulled it down because I am insanely hyper focused on this baby startup. And I went,
Yeah.
God damn,
Yeah.
that's good stuff. So tell me, like,
Yeah.
how is that sacrifice going? How are you feeling about that?
Yeah. There's so much to unpack in that question.
Mm-hmm.
And you know this, and most founders know it. There's a lot of things that I was protecting, like in just that simple motion of like in my personal social media account, I have a lot of followers, I have a lot of influence, and it's where I've worked really hard to get there.
Yeah.
Right. But there's two things that it distracting me from. One was my work, right, which was building our work brand, especially after the rebrand, and putting my energy specifically into that, and not just a personal brand, but like specifically into PAIV and who we are and what we represent. And then the other part is protecting my family. And it was like, when you're a founder, there's an immense amount of time and effort that's going into the job.
Mm-hmm.
And so then when you have this personal brand, work brand, and then family, I was like, those three are a lot right now. And so I want to focus really on these two.
Something's got to give.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And my wife deserved that. The kids deserved it,
That's cool.
and so that focus has created this really great family atmosphere on one end. And then the other end has allowed us to focus on the brand.
That's so cool.
Which is really hard for me, by the way. Like the ego is telling you like, turn it back on, but
Fight the ego.
Yeah.
It's always wrong.
Yeah.
You're touching on something that I still have an internal turmoil over. And it is that I talk to a lot of founders. A really consistent theme is sometimes it can be really painful to get your identity completely wrapped up and lost in this business. And it's hard not to, because it really is. It's your blood, sweat, tears. It's your sacrifice. You're sacrificing monetarily. You're sacrificing quality time from someone that needs you all the time. And you're doing so paying yourself last typically, and you're just hoping this creates value for a lot of people, and you included on that list at some point in time. And so it really is, there's so much weight to it. And when you are taking that kind of a risk and you're like jumping out of an airplane, of course you're going to feel emotionally attached to it, and you're going to lose yourself in it a little bit. And with my previous business, I didn't exist outside of it. I had completely lost all sight of who in the world I was. And it was really painful when the two had to separate and I had to figure out who in the hell I actually was.
Yeah, come back to who you are. Yeah.
So as I've been building this new business, I kind of go, I've been cautious to get too much in the trenches emotionally with it, and to go too hard and just to maintain myself and the things that, and I find something missing, which, is true of every cool business you see out there. The founders are obsessed, like they are. And I think that obsession only drives incredible performance for the business. It just doesn't, you can't be lukewarm about it and expect insane results. It is the crux. It is the decision. And it's back to that, like, is work-life balance real? Like, is there a reality there?
Yeah, I think so. I agree. Like there are at times you lose yourself, but I had the chance to do some acting early on, both in plays and film, and there's different techniques,
I didn't know this, by the way. I've been dying to ask. I did not know this.
Yeah.
Continue.
It was a passion. It was a hobby. It was, and I thought I was going to do it professionally. Like I actually moved to Hollywood to do it. And it turned out it wasn't like something I wanted to do for my family. Like my family became more important than what that offered at the time. But it taught me different techniques. And one of the techniques is method acting, which we often hear about, where an actor will go and completely lose themselves. And they literally become that thing, that character, right? And that thing or that character,
like Joker, right?
Yeah,
in that movie.
Yeah,
anyway,
Heath Ledger.
Sorry.
That's exactly. Daniel Day-Lewis is a great example where you're calling him that name for a year or however long the filming is. I don't know how you have a relationship. But I think a lot of people believe that being an entrepreneur or a founder is the same thing, that you need to completely lose yourself in the method of being that.
Yeah.
And I think the older I get, the more I've learned that there's this different technique The one that I studied was called the Meisner technique. And you are acting truthfully
Mm-hmm.
under imaginary circumstances.
Okay,
So
explain.
that's what it's called. So if this were imaginary and we
Mm-hmm.
were in a play and you said something to me from a line on a script, and you said, I hate your guts or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
As an actor, I have to be able to take in that line truthfully, even though the situation is
Mm.
imaginary,
Yeah.
and then respond with truth,
Okay.
right? Like, even though it's another line. And when you're done with that scene, you unplug and you go home. And I'm Jess, and,
Yeah.
I'm not that actor that was doing that thing truthfully in the moment. And so I've really tried to learn in this role, that I'm playing as a founder, that when I'm in that role, I am fully in that role and it's truthful and it's everything that I am. But like when you have to unplug, that you really try to unplug as yourself. And I'm not saying it's easy to do or
Yeah.
that I'm perfect at it, but like my family deserves that.
Yeah.
They deserve to have me instead of just the person that's like, trying to solve problems on my business.
You're not wrong. It's actually super impressive. I have a lot of respect for that. It's also really fascinating. I'm going to think on that one for a minute.
It's really hard. Like and I'm even thinking, because Kirsten, my wife, is also a professional, and so when we get home and we both got all that stuff on our brains,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to not go there often.
Right.
It's hard. So even saying this, I don't want to be a hypocrite and say that it's easy. It's hard to unplug, but you got to figure out ways to do it. And part of that is boundaries.
Yeah.
Part of that is like, when you're building something, you still have to hold to your boundaries of like, I can't pick up the phone right now
Yeah.
for an hour,
Yeah.
or whatever it is. Like, put that away for a minute. And I had a really hard time doing that until I started to like get rid of some of those things that were holding my ego.
Yeah. Yeah. This is funny because you and I have done, I wasn't intending to bring this up, but you and I have done this. This is at least our third podcast
Yeah.
together over
Yeah.
the years.
Number 3. Yeah.
And the last time you and I were talking, I was in a pretty rough patch. And I remember you asking me the question that I kind of trumped up a little bit about. And the question was, like, what do you think that you're doing this for? Like, did you
Mm.
find some reason that you were doing all of this for? And at the time, we also talked about this today. I was way too close to the situation, I think, to have that kind of clarity.
Yeah.
But your words have been in the back of my mind since then. I'm sure you have, would be surprised to hear that. But I've thought about that often. And when you think of things like, I've gotten really good at being home with my kids and being present compared to who I used to be.
Mm.
And I keep finding this like challenge to bring that heat and that fire. And I have this slight worry that like I know how to crush things, but if I'm this balance of these, two people, it's just kind of a slower and a longer haul. And so trying to just balance that energy and, who and where. And I'll find myself really loving that time with kids. And then I go, oh my gosh, I get to work now. And I get to like crush it. And I run to work and I just like, but what am I chasing in that moment? And like, what is that I'm so excited to get back for?
Mm.
It's that bump, that hit of like crossing something off a list or feeling like I'm moving something. And so it's that little reminder every day of like, why is that? And what is that I'm chasing? What is that like,
Yeah.
Brain chemical bump that it gives to each one of us, right? There's a lot to unpack there.
There's something, not everybody's built that way, right?
Mm-hmm,
Like, I think we noticed that.
Yeah.
Not everybody's built that way. There's almost an addiction to solving big problems.
Yeah.
Like it's like there is this satisfaction, even if it's as simple as like over the Thanksgiving break, I started working on my garage. It's just been kind of messy and in disarray.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I'm going to start, kind of organizing this. And in the exact same way, like just solving those problems, there's this gratification that comes to us as human beings, right? And then once those problems get bigger and bigger and you're making a bigger impact, it almost becomes even more addictive.
Do you think it's a search for relevance?
I think it's probably validation, right? Like I think there's a core to it. Like if I were to like really go deep down inside,
Mm-hmm.
there is probably a core desire to be validated,
Yeah.
and to be loved.
Yeah.
And then from that core, and this is probably why they say that like, kids who have a certain level of neglect are really good entrepreneurs. And there's studies around this. It's horrible,
It's horrible,
but
but
it's
true.
true that there's a certain level.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean that my mom was neglectful, but like there's a certain level of independence maybe that comes from our childhood,
A little bit of hyper independence, yeah.
hyper independence,
Mm-hmm.
where we become really good at solving problems, but those problems are often tied to validation from other people
Yeah.
of like, if I solve this problem, will they then accept me?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I bet if we looked at like the heart of a lot of entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
there's probably some of that in everybody.
It's really interesting, isn't it? I I've got a list here of questions that
Yeah.
were really thoughtful because I wanted to make sure that the whole world knew everything about your
They were, by the way,
incredible
I read them.
professional
Yeah.
career.
Yeah.
But I also knew in the back of my mind that I would want to go off on these weird tangents. And I text Jess and
Yeah.
said, "Can I talk about weird
Let's
stuff?"
talk about weird stuff. Yeah.
Because I think that people that go through extreme experiences in their life have the most fun conversations like to be had, right? And I think the older you get, the wiser you get, and also the more intense situations that you survive and you go through and you start to see the world in a different way, it can feel very lonely and isolating. And then you find those people and you're like, okay, can we weird out for a minute?
Yeah. Yep.
Which does bring me to my next somewhat normal question, which is how do you address the mentality shift that needed to take place between old Jess and founder Jess?
Yeah. Wow. I wish it was just a light switch,
Yeah.
you know? Maybe that would have been easier, but I think the mindset of who I was and who I'm becoming, is almost like the challenge that you have to rise to, right? Like when I took on this challenge and was given this opportunity, there's this person that I have to become in order for this to be successful that I wasn't, you know, like, and that's both a spiritual and a professional journey.
Oh yeah, I
And
feel that.
in the spiritual realm of things, healing that inner child that's seeking validation while still trying to become this professional who needs to understand cap table, how to go out and raise money, you know, like getting the title of chief revenue officer as an example scared the shit out of me because I'm like, I don't know anything about revenue. You know what I mean? Like I know how to generate it. How do I manage it? How do I display it in a way to get an investor to have interest in our company?
Yeah.
How do I manage or read a P&L? Like those things terrified me. And so to answer your question, it's like I looked at that person and I said, that's who I have to become in order to be in this role. And I think once I get there, which I'm still working towards that person, but once I get there, there's going to be another one that I'm like, okay, what does that
for sure
person look like?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the concept somebody had said to me one time, like, as soon as you get to the top of the hill, you're just at the bottom of another.
Yeah.
And I don't think until you're able to really visualize, it's like you don't know what questions to ask until you have a level of understanding, right? And then the more you see sort of different people in different places, and also you understand the gap more clearly between where you are and exactly honing in on who you want to be. I think that's the coolest part about being in your 40s.
Yeah.
That's what I'm feeling. It's like I had this artificial success, if you will. And I had, people telling me you're so incredible and you're young and you have this business and it didn't sit right with me at the time because inside I'm just like, I don't know what I'm doing. And you got people, this is, it's just imposter syndrome. And of course, you know what you're doing. It's certainly, there's a lot of talent and work and hustle. And it's not like it was complete accidental, but I think once you get over that hill and you kind of go, okay, well, who do I need to be to sit in that and hear those, either hear the feedback or even just like create something like that and feel like it was not accidental. It was more thought out, more purposeful. It gave me a better roadmap to really identify my own weak spots, not just professionally, which they were long, but emotionally, as a parent, as a partner, so many things to go to work on. And then I just put my head down and like went to work. And so I love that it feels like you just gave the exact same experience in your own perspective. Do you feel like there's been parts of that experience that were more surprising that you didn't expect?
Yeah, I think I think the amount of trust I've been given was, um, makes me emotional. Was overwhelming
That's cool.
because I've been in leadership
Mm-hmm.
positions, but never in positions where what I did impacted so many jobs
Yeah.
and so many lives, and the decisions, and not me personally, but also with my founding members, like the decisions that we're making ultimately could affect somebody's life and livelihood. I've never felt that
Yeah.
so intensely.
Yeah.
Um, and that's like a hard burden, I think, that a lot of people might not recognize when they're looking at a CEO or somebody in that position that has to make a hard decision that might, you might have to let people go
Mm-hmm.
to protect the rest of the company.
Right.
That simple decision can make that person look evil almost, right? Or they
Oh,
can be
absolutely.
demonized because of that. And I wasn't ready for that part,
Mm-hmm.
like I like to be, I don't like to burn bridges. I like to have good relationships.
Yeah.
And so I started to realize I did have to let go of this piece of like, there are going to be some people that just won't like you
Yeah.
because of the decisions you have to make.
Yeah.
That was a hard reality for me to grasp and still grasping.
It's like a calling, right? It's like a
Mm-hmm.
greater calling, and I think the more that you look at it that way, the more that it is that for you. But again, just like being a parent or like any other great calling, there's the highs and there's the lows. But I think ultimately what you were describing is like a really lonely road and a really
Mm.
lonely place when you really start to grasp the full weight that's on your shoulders. And I think, again, I think there's only like 0.0000% of people, in the world that really sort of understand what that feeling's like. And so if it is you listening, you should definitely get around people that have experienced that, both on the lows and the highs. 'Cause I love how vulnerable you are about that process and that experience. Do you Do you feel like it's given you any sort of clarity for where you want to take PAIV or where you want to take your own entrepreneurial experience beyond even PAIV?
Yeah, I think, well, the first thing, the first thing that it's impacted the most has been my relationship. Like,
Yeah.
um, with my partner, I think getting honest with myself in a professional setting has helped me to get honest with myself in a personal setting.
Hmm.
And sometimes it's reverse,
Yeah.
and it's really like it's opened up so many incredible avenues for us to connect personally, because of the challenges that we're taking on professionally. And you have to be on the same team.
Mm-hmm.
You
Oh,
know,
yeah.
you know this better than anybody. Like, especially when you're building something together,
Yeah.
right? Like, you got to get on the same team. And you're mentioning your kids earlier. There are different phases that we go through in business and in entrepreneurship. And I think the better you are at recruiting your whole family to those phases, the better off that phase is going to go.
Oh,
And
sure.
so, for example, if you were to go home to your kids and you said, "Hey, we've got this opportunity, Radical is taking off.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we are just like to the moon right now. The next 6 months are going to be crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You might not see me a whole lot, but I want you to know I still love you, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How can we work together as a team to make this possible?"
Yeah.
And I feel like if you can, too many people kind of hide it or feel guilty or whatever, but it's like, what I'm learning is that if you can recruit friends and family to the mission, the same way that we're trying to recruit people inside of our business,
Right.
then make it holistic. Like, make it this holistic thing where, like, let's go out and do this together. Like,
That's such good advice.
them kids are part of it.
That's such good advice. Yeah, I definitely can relate to that probably in lower times. Remember how we were kind of like riding high and things were good? They're not going to be good.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's going to be okay, but we're
yeah,
going to have to bond together.
yeah,
And I think that's your own way also of not closing off and just saying, nobody understands my challenges or my problems, and I'm just on an island and I'm just going to have to curl into a ball.
yeah,
I actually really love that. That's really great advice.
yeah. Thank you.
Um, Let me look here. I'm going to go ahead and guess. I shouldn't guess. What do you feel like?
My age.
I was gonna say I'm gonna guess you haven't had any horrible, terrible failures, but I'm not gonna guess that. I love to bring up failures
Yeah.
from a perspective of shifting how you look at them and also taking them and moving forward from them. And I think it's very timely
Yeah.
for right now.
Yeah.
What would you say are some failures you're open to sharing in this journey that you've been able to move past?
Yeah, so there's a couple, and I know I sprinkle in a lot of personal here because I think it's relevant, and probably not a lot of people
Very relevant.
are willing to talk about that.
Yeah.
I've had some businesses fail, and I've had some, some sales organizations that I've lost, like built really big sales teams that I've lost to other companies, or and I think that's maybe a little more common, but I've had relationships that have failed, and to the point where, like, if you look at my record on paper, so to speak, it doesn't look good. Like and I'm not trying to like degrade myself by saying that. I'm saying, like, I had a lot to learn with personal relationships, and the lesson was, and I hope this kind of helps answer, like, as far as failures, I wasn't looking enough at myself.
Yeah.
And there's this saying of, like, when you're pointing at somebody, you've got three fingers pointing back at you. It's like, I would say that.
Yeah.
I would be the one saying that and kind of convincing myself that these other people have these things or these issues, and that I'm good, and I don't have problems. And not that I don't have problems,
The victim
but
in the situation.
yeah,
Maybe. Yeah.
but yes, more of a victim.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, like, some narcissistic thinking, like,
Yeah.
where it's like, I am here. And what shifted for me, and probably a lot of people probably wouldn't know that about me, right? Like, the in these personal relationships, I was struggling with how to put that person truly first.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know what that meant. And what I've learned is that I was afraid to fully be honest with them and myself.
Wow.
And so in these relationships, partially the reason that they were failing is that I wasn't coming to the table with my full self
Mm-hmm.
and being willing to let them accept that person or not.
Hmm.
And so what happens is you end up being this person that's kind of like a version of yourself, but not fully yourself.
Yeah.
Once your full self starts to come out, this other person goes, who is that? Like, that's not the person that I met, like, that's not the person I was introduced to. And so then you're playing this game of, like, not being real or not being authentic. And then those relationships start to kind of corrode, right? And it's not like either person's a bad person. It's just,
Sure.
so I know that's a lot, but, like, my whole point is that the lesson that I've learned from failed relationships, like romantic, personal relationships, is that I have to be fully who I am and fully honest with myself and with that other person. And it's simply integrity.
Yeah.
It's be who you are and do what you say you're going to do, and then allow that other person to either accept you or not accept you.
Yeah.
And live with it.
I think that's beautiful. I just kept thinking of business relationships, even though you were talking about romantic relationships, right? Like, I think it's just such great advice for every relationship. But it's puzzling for me to hear you talk about, I don't know, failed relationships. Like, I guess I'm not surprised that they exist, but I've always known you as the relationship guy, and you've always been the same consistent person in how you've showed up for me, around me, every time I've known you since 2020, which is crazy. So, I mean, I guess it just goes to show you, right? Like, the challenges that people are dealing with on the inside are not always
Well, and people
even
develop,
visible.
Right? Yeah. Like, we meet people at different parts of our journey.
Yeah.
We've been lucky to meet towards maybe not the end, but, like, when it comes to relationships, where I've gotten healthier,
A mature place.
Immature, where and again, all credit to my wife for how she's taught me how to manage relationships and how to, she's Kirsten.
You guys have an incredible relationship.
She's like the most honest person I've ever met in my life.
It's very admirable the way that you are both able. I mean, first and foremost, you guys show up for each other, like, aggressively when it counts, and that's something that means a lot to me. But you're also able to navigate some interesting things, right? Like, my husband and I work together. We have for a very, very long time. I've been on the different teams thing for a minute.
Yeah. Yeah.
like of the industry and different, it's tough. There's a lot of tough things that can come up, and you definitely got to exhibit a lot
Yeah.
of grace,
Yeah.
but it's a little easier for us when we're on the same team.
I know. I agree. Yeah. And I like, I did have a thought though too. Like we had, a mutual experience. Like Steve was part of a company that ended up, going out of business that
Mm-hmm.
I was also part of, and that was a big part of my journey because like there I was able to like learn and grow in my position, and watching that company fail, like it made me like part of me felt like was like if that failed, is that going to reflect back on me?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
if people look back at that company now,
Right.
knowing that I was there or see it on my resume or
The
whatever,
black mark for you.
yeah, like is that how they're going to see it?
Mm-hmm.
And then I step back and I'm like, who cares how they see it? Like what I got out of it is what I'm building now,
Yes.
right? Like you can look at that when it could be, black, red, green, whatever the check mark is. And what I learned is what I'm taking with me now and what I'm building and how you view it,
Oh, I love
you
that you
know?
said that. I had a little bit of epiphany of my own that was the exact same. I had a friend of mine in the space that, you know, didn't really open up fully, but you could just hear in the voice and everything. There's the downtrodden. Just we've all been through a lot, and this person's kind of in the thick of it. And I responded with, "What do you say to somebody that feels like they've lost everything?" I've been that person, and there aren't really the right words to say because when it's fresh and all you can think of is the loss and the things that are leaving you, it's probably the world's biggest challenge to try to find a little bit of grace, especially when you're, tapping an empty well. But what I said to this person was the thing that's given me solace now that I'm further away from it. And I feel like someone said it to me, or maybe I saw it, and it was probably the most frustrating thing is just this idea that nothing is ever truly lost. And I don't know that I've felt like a saying or something so strongly as I feel that now. And the idea that again makes me so happy to look back on where I've been, and I could focus on all of the things that I've lost and I could tell you stories for
Yeah.
hours.
Yeah.
And it's almost shocking, to the degree. Um and then the other side of that is you can sit and pick apart every single experience, every positive, every negative. And I'm genuinely now in this space where I look back on that with full grace, and I have grace for the people that were a part of the good and the bad. And I'm just overwhelmed with gratitude for just
Yeah.
the concept that I was able to experience those things and the lessons learned and the knowledge and the experience that I get to take all that, and it didn't go anywhere. It can't go
Yeah.
anywhere because it happened and it was real and it's mine, right? Mine. I get to do whatever I want to do with it and also with the person that I am because of it. And when you really think of all of those things that just sort of resurface in your life as your journey keeps going, every time they come in, it's just like this realization of, wow, nothing's ever lost. Nothing's ever lost. This is coming back. It looks different,
Yeah.
but it does. And I feel like that's been true for both of you guys as I've
Yeah.
seen you move on from
From
that
hard
particular
things.
challenge. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you made me think too. There's Andrew Garfield. He's an actor.
Oh, yeah.
The new Spider-Man,
Spider
I think.
Man.
Yeah. But he was in an interview and he was talking about his mom and he started crying and the interviewer kind of apologized and he said, no, don't apologize. This is all the unexpressed love that I have
Yeah.
for her. Um, and it made me think of what you just said of like nothing's ever truly lost, even when we fail, like quote unquote fail, right? Like which I believe you either what is it, you win or you learn.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so even if you fail, there's all these it's mourning, right? There's all these unexpressed things that you didn't get to accomplish,
Yeah.
and in a lot of ways, it moves us into this next space where we take that with us. Like we take it, whether it's a chip on our shoulder or whatever we want to call it.
It be coming
We
along.
we take it with us. It's not going anywhere.
Right. Right.
And that is ultimately what creates this new beginning. It's like the forest fire that creates a new forest. It's incredible.
Oh, I love that. This has been a beautiful conversation. That's been really fun for me. But I think to end it, I want to ask about, do you think of what you're doing in terms of a legacy that you want to leave behind? And if you do, if you use that term legacy, or if you use something else, like how do you want to be thought of, revered, known?
Hmm. I think what's more important to me than what I leave behind, it's how I built it. It's like, um, what is my character? You know, like if my kids, my family, and that's truly who matters the most when it comes to legacy to me. Is, are my girls, when they go out and they build their own businesses, do they look at my character and my integrity and how I've built something in a way that they admire?
Yeah.
And other people, like if I have an opportunity to talk about this more as I age and gain more wisdom, um, my why has always been my how, right? Like it's like, how do you do something in a way that benefits and impacts other people? And that's part of my mission. And to impact human beings in a way that I can connect with them, they can feel special even just for a moment, and then they can take that and impact somebody else. I think that's what's important, is like the how I built it and not what was built.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that a lot. As we end here, I will say that my team got a chance to kind of take a peek at what you guys have going on, and my team here at Radical is huge fans of you guys at PAIV, and
Thank you.
including Emily, CEO, who is a fun follow. But you
Yeah.
guys are you're doing something incredible and special, and I think it's really neat. And I am excited to just be a part of helping the world know about more about you.
Thank you.
Where would you say they should come to find out how to grow their business by partnering with PAIV?
Thank you. So PAIV.ai is a great place. Just check out the website. Follow the company Instagram page, PAIV.official.
Jess comes back in
And
the
yeah,
future,
yeah,
right?
I'll come back later. Watch out. And the best thing you can do in software is get a demo. Like, just check it out. It's hard to like go on a website or to hear me talk about it
Right.
and really know how it can help sales and service teams. But just request a demo. We'll show you how it works. And we really want to bridge the gap between sales and service revenue, and meaning technicians, salespeople, and increasing revenue for businesses. And we'll show you how we do that.
Oh, that's so
So
cool. There's a lot of exciting stuff coming, and
yeah,
you guys are definitely at the top of that list. So
thank you so much. That means a lot
thank you so much
to
for
be
being
here.
with me, Jess.
Yeah,
You're the best.
appreciate the time.